Jeffrey Dahmer was a very complex person.
He is pure evil, but you'd never know it by looking at him. But when you hear him, that's another story.
Police today found 6 more bodies
under the home of suspected killer John Gacy.
As my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons.
I'm a power person. I enjoy power. Nobody else had the guts to pull off what I pulled off. I outsmarted you again.
No! No! No quiero más. I don't hate him.
You don't hate him?
No. That would hurt me.
Number 5, Jeffrey Dahmer.
No one had a clue as to what was happening for over a decade.
Now that's a name that pops up all over TikTok and other social media platforms, mainly for 2 reasons. 1, there's that Netflix documentary about him, and 2, his notorious cannibalistic crimes from the 90s. But here's something many don't know. Dahmer was also a child serial slayer.
One time I brought this young man back to the hotel room, the Ambassador Hotel. Was just planning on drugging him and spending the night with him. Had no intention of hurting him. When I woke up in the morning, he had a broken rib here, was heavily bruised. Apparently I had beaten him to death with my fists.
And you have no memory
I
of
have
it?
no memory of it. But that's what started the whole spree all over again.
Born on May 21st, 1960, in Wisconsin to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, young Jeffrey seemed like an ordinary kid at first glance. However, beneath the surface, there was something seriously off. He was awkward around people and had a creepy fascination with lifeless things and animals. During his teenage years, things got worse. Dahmer began drinking heavily and discovered he was gay, a fact he kept hidden. With a string of failures trailing him, he eventually spiraled into a horrifying slaying spree.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them?
Right.
Dahmer slayed over 16 men, including 2 14-year-olds. His method was chillingly methodical. He'd lure his victims into his apartment, prey on them, slay them, and then dismember their bodies. To make it even more gruesome, he cooked and consumed parts of their bodies to feel a twisted sense of closeness to them.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons.
The nightmare continued until 1991, when one of his unlucky victims, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape Dahmer's clutches and alerted the police. The subsequent search of Dahmer's apartment revealed a house of horrors. Human parts in the fridge, drums of acid mixed with body parts, and a smell that investigators described as the stench of demise.
Jeffrey Dahmer is recalling his monstrous past. Almost 2 years ago in this little apartment in Milwaukee, police discovered the grisly remnants of one of the most horrible crime sprees in American history.
I always knew that it was wrong, but
Dahmer's capture and trial led to 15 life sentences. Interestingly, unlike many serial slayers, he expressed remorse, wishing he could undo his actions.
Did you like feeling evil?
No, I didn't. But I had tried to overcome the thoughts, and it worked for a while, but eventually I gave in.
His time in prison was cut short when he was slayed by a fellow inmate in 1994, an ending he reportedly did not resist, perhaps seeing it as an escape from his own torment.
Do you still feel those same urges? Do you still feel that compulsion, that obsession?
I wish I could say that it just left completely, but no, there are times when I still do have the old compulsions.
Number 4, Javed Iqbal.
I am Javed Iqbal, killer of 100 children. I hate this world. I am not ashamed of my actions, and I am ready to die. I have no regrets. I killed 100 children.
Javed Iqbal, born in Lahore, Pakistan on October 8, 1956, is one of the most infamous child serial slayers in history. His father was a businessman, and Iqbal himself seemed to have a relatively stable upbringing. However, a dark and twisted side of him emerged, leading to the gruesome slayings of at least 100 young boys. Iqbal's targets were vulnerable boys aged 6 to 16, often orphans or street children.
In early December 1999, a local newspaper and police in Lahore, the second largest city in Pakistan, received a disturbing letter. The person who wrote the letter claimed to have murdered 100 boys who were orphans and runaways between the ages of 6 and 16.
He lured them with promises of food, money, and care, only to subject them to horrific abuse before slaying them. Iqbal dismembered their bodies and dissolved the remains in acid, a method as gruesome as it is calculated.
The writer confessed to luring the boys from the streets of Lahore to his home, violating and strangling them to death. He then dismembered the bodies of the boys and dumped them into vats of hydrochloric and sulfuric acid to get rid of evidence.
In a shocking twist, Iqbal himself reported his crimes to both the police and a journalist, detailing his gruesome methods. He claimed to have committed these acts as retaliation against the police, who he said had wrongfully accused him of sodomy, leading to his mother's fatal heart attack. This twisted logic drove him to inflict unimaginable pain on over 100 mothers, mirroring the suffering he believed his own mother endured.
Apparently, his urge to kill stemmed from extreme rage when he lost his fortune and the death of his mother while he was imprisoned. He wanted to make 100 mothers cry for their sons, just as his own mother cried for him before her death.
In November 1999, a nationwide manhunt for Iqbal was launched, and he turned himself in a month later. His trial was swift, and he was sentenced to demise by hanging. The judge decreed that his body should be cut into 100 pieces and dissolved in acid, mirroring the fate he imposed on his victims. However, before this sentence could be carried out, Iqbal took his own life in the prison cell. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy.
I got news for you. I killed 33 times. You're only going to kill me once. Gacy outsmarted him again.
John Wayne Gacy, often dubbed the Killer Clown, is the stuff of nightmares, especially if you already have a fear of clowns. Born in Chicago on March 17, 1942, Gacy seemed like a regular guy, a respected businessman even, but lurking beneath that friendly exterior was a monstrous secret. In 1967, he was jailed for intimately forcing a teenage boy, but was out on parole after just 18 months. Instead of reforming, he escalated his heinous activities. Posing as a friendly employer, he lured young boys to his home under the guise of offering them construction work. Once inside, they were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Gacy's method involved tricking his victims into handcuffs as part of a magic trick, then torturing and strangling them. Some bodies were buried in his crawl space, while others were discarded in a nearby river. Despite numerous boys disappearing, Gacy wasn't suspected for years, largely because he maintained his image as a genial businessman and even performed as Pogo the Clown at children's parties. His facade finally crumbled in 1978 with the slaying of 15-year-old Robert Piest. During the investigation, police discovered the remains of over 30 boys in Gacy's home.
Police today found 6 more bodies
under the home of suspected killer John Gacy.
Gacy denied everything, claiming he didn't know the boys and suggesting a frame-up. Despite his denials, he was convicted of 33 slayings in 1980 and sentenced to demise. After 14 years on death row, Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Even to the end, he professed his innocence. Number 2. Luis Alfredo. Luis Alfredo Garavito, the monster from Genova was guilty of intimately exploiting and slaying at least 189 younglings. He confessed to the crimes, which took place in the 1990s, during a span that lasted less than a decade. The self-confessed serial slayer committed his crimes in at least 11 of Colombia's 32 departments. He also committed some crimes in neighboring Ecuador. To get close to his victims, he disguised himself as a homeless person, a monk or a disabled person, and approached foundations that worked with children, which were often of humble origin. Sometimes he would also lure children with sweets or promises to gain their trust and take them to less crowded areas. Garavito, who was also known as the Beast, was captured in April 1999 and charged for intimate relations, violent carnal access, homicide, arson, and kidnapping. Garavito was initially sentenced in 2000 to more than 1,800 years in prison for slaying and physically exploiting 189 children aged between 8 and 16. However, he was eventually only sentenced to 40 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence allowed by Colombian law at the time. Throughout his incarceration, Garavito gave several interviews to various national and international media outlets. In them, apart from confessing to the crimes and indicating where he buried his victims, he claimed to be repentant and to have embraced the Christian faith. The possibility of Garavito being released on parole has always been roundly opposed by Colombia, which lived in fear before he was arrested in the 1990s, which was already a very violent time for the country. Number 1. Anthony Kirkland. Born on September 13, 1968, Kirkland is a notorious Cincinnati serial slayer whose terror spree from 2006 to 2009 left 4 females lifeless, including 2 teenagers. Kirkland's violent tendencies first emerged on May 20, 1987, when he intimately exploited and slayed his girlfriend, Leola Douglas, setting her body ablaze. He served 16 years for voluntary manslaughter and, despite earning a GED and associate degree in prison, continued his violent behavior. Paroled in 2004, Kirkland resumed slaying, strangling, and burning his victims. Caught in 2009 with his last victim's belongings. Kirkland's trial was swift and damning. Pleading guilty to some charges, he faced a jury that found him guilty on all counts, recommending the demise penalty. Sentenced to demise on March 31, 2010, Kirkland's fate was sealed. Despite numerous appeals and a brief stay of execution, the court's decision remained firm. In 2018, a jury once again sentenced him to demise. Now, Anthony Kirkland waits on death row, a grim reminder of a dark soul lost to monstrous deeds.